Because of the infamous Blackwater ferry heist, RDR2 protagonist Arthur Morgan never got to experience the more southern regions of the game, but today, thanks to a little assistance from in-game mods, he's going on vacation to see the sites he never got to. We visit over 20 separate locations in New Austin, giving Arthur a chance to speak to people he never would have, shop in stores he never got to, take on gangs he'd otherwise never meet, and drink in saloons he'd never have a chance to. If you enjoy the following, you all know what to do, and if you're new here and aren't already subscribed to the channel, please consider doing so. With that being said, you're listening to Phil, and let's get into what we came here to see. First off is the small fishing village of Quaker Cove, a little south of Blackwater. Even though the place had traces that it was still inhabited, there didn't seem to be anyone around, and after searching a little and finding some provisions and whatnot, there wasn't much else to do here but enjoy a spot of fishing, in which I caught a small redfin pickerel. With it being only little, it wouldn't have made much of a meal, so back into the waters it went. Next, I headed a little north to visit the small holding of Manzanita Post. Introducing myself to the locals, they all seemed friendly enough and didn't seem to mind me taking a few valuables. In a room to the rear of the holding, hidden beneath the floorboards, was a photograph of a young couple and their small baby. Written on the back of this is the word Uren. Translating from Norwegian to English, it means unclean. One of the locals was holding a newspaper scrapping, also in Norwegian, which ties in with this picture, but that's a different story for a different time. Soon, I found myself at Tanner's Reach, which was the home of Dutch's favourite writer, Evelyn Miller. Although there were some provisions that I could stock up on, there was no presence of the author himself, although some of his work sprawled across the desk indicated that he'd been here potentially recently. A stone's throw away from Tanner's Reach was Aurora Basin, a small lake with a structure on its edge known as Swad Bass Point. Although there was once again no presence of anyone nearby, I did uncover that this was the location of a legendary fish. Also at Aurora Basin was an abandoned camp known as the Wiki Up, which I believe was the former location of the Wapiti tribe, to which Arthur made a sketching of this in his journal. There was one area I really wanted to visit, which was a little to the north of our current location. Gamers who've played the original Red Dead Redemption will remember this area as Kokanee, the camp of Dutch's new gang after the fall of the Van der Linde boys. Unfortunately, this place wasn't the same as it was during 1911, and aside from a bunch of rock faces and slippery slopes, there wasn't much else going on here. Heading south once more, I found myself at Bearclaw Camp, a settlement which had long been abandoned. Several corpses could be found here, some of which were covered in arrows indicating a violent end. Most of the buildings and vehicles were broken down and collapsed, but there was something very eerie to be discovered at this camp, an apparent haunted well. If Arthur had his lantern lit up once he descended to the bottom, things didn't seem too out of the ordinary, but once the lantern was extinguished, a strange phenomenon would occur, giving Arthur a frighteningly ghostly appearance. Was this simple light trickery, or was there something more to this? One landmark that Arthur hadn't visited in this area just yet was Thieves Landing. In 1911, this small town was thriving with activity, but during our visit, it was inhabited with nothing more than the Del Lobo gang members. I hadn't seen a great deal of action during my visit so far, so I decided to do the world a favour and dispose of the outlaws in a fight that would be a lot more difficult than I first anticipated. Aside from the loot I uncovered both on the bodies and in the surrounding buildings, I was happy to find myself a collectible hat known as the Bolero. Nearby Thieves Landing was a small dock known as Stillwater Creek, which homes not only a cabin, but the location of another legendary fish. Even though I didn't possess the greatest of fishing equipment at this time, I thought I'd try my chances. I caught a bluegill instead. To the south, just before the waters of the San Luis River, there's a home called the Old Bacchus Place, which once again, players of the original Red Dead Redemption may remember. It was, and judging by the familiar white shirt hanging on the clothesline outside, still is occupied by the peculiar character of Seth Byers, an obsessed treasure hunter whom John meets in 1911. The place was infested with rats, and the only thing worthy of taking was a fertility statue hidden inside the fireplace. I was contemplating taking a nap, but the rat choppings on the sheets helped me decide otherwise. I did visit other locations, such as this one, known as Brittlebrush Troll, but some were nothing more than small cabins with a few items to loot. But I did uncover something pretty comical as I made my way north to McFarland's Ranch. From a large tree, I heard cries shouting the following.
Just leave me be! Yeah, what do you want?
And after shooting out some of the floorboards, I could see the legs of a person whom soon after fell to his death while still in his underwear. Heading to McFarland's Ranch shortly after, I realised it wasn't as advanced as we would have come to see in 1911, but the inhabitants were still friendly to Arthur, for the most part. Although most of the interiors were inaccessible, there was a few that Arthur could enter, but in all honesty, it just provoked more looting, not much more. Even the main house, home of Bonnie and her father, couldn't be entered, nor could the train station, so it was time to move on. To the west of the ranch was Piks Basin, an area often visited in 1911, so I wanted to see the sights once more. Aside from studying a few reptiles and such, there was nothing else here, but still, it was nice to behold the visuals. After searching a few more abandoned buildings, I found myself at Lake Don Julio, north of the Real Del Lobo Rock. Some may remember this location as the home of current Pinkerton detective agent and later head of the Bureau of Investigation, Edgar Ross. Unfortunately, he wasn't home. Just south of this was the Real Del Lobo house, which I discovered not only some provisions but some reading material. Hell, Heck and Thunder on the Rawhide Road, the incredible true tales of Frank Heck. After some light reading, I moved on. Slightly north of the lake was Venter's Place, currently occupied by the Del Lobo gang, to which we witnessed a robbery being performed on the intoxicated members of the gang. After the lady left, I was happy to see that she'd left some cash behind, so as Arthur, I helped myself. And was that a picture of Hosea Matthews on the wall? I came across an old battlefield called Riley's Charge, not too far from Venter's, where I would find some ammunition. But what was really intriguing was a site a little north of this at the abandoned settlement known as Two Crows. Here, tied to a mill, were the remains of a lady who bore an animal mask. It seemed like some form of cruel punishment, but it was actually just a reference to a famous glitch from Red Dead Redemption 1 known as the Donkey Lady. Rockstar does love to poke fun at itself. I visited Cooch Chapel, and although I couldn't gain access to the building itself, I was able to visit the graveyard where I discovered the final resting places of some of the McFarland family members, and one which read A Cowboy with No Name, an obvious reference to the Clint Eastwood western movie franchise A Man with No Name. On my travels, Arthur must have been feeling a little lonesome and decided to sing to himself for entertainment. That's when I knew he needed to visit civilization.
With graceful ease, she dropped her spotless linen, her snow-white knees, two tiny sky-blue garters upon her legs she wore.
As I entered the nearby burning town of Armadillo and quickly disposed of some thugs, which I believed to be with the Del Lobo gang, I was greeted by the local sheriff, whom quickly resigned his position after the encounter. Due to this activity, the general store and saloon weren't serving at first, but it wasn't long before I was able to grab Arthur a whiskey, chat with one of the locals who informed me more of the cholera outbreak, and visited Herbert Moon at his store where I purchased some new clothing. Heading north, I found myself at Twin Rocks, which I originally believed to be a gang hideout, but soon discovered that the armed guards were not only friendly towards Arthur, but didn't seem to mind me snooping around and helping myself to some of their belongings. Either that, or they were robbing the place themselves. After visiting a few more locations, I headed towards Fort Mesa, which would later become the home of Bill Williamson and his gang. This was inhabited by a local gang, and they didn't appreciate Arthur trespassing. This wasn't a fight I would become victorious in. Coming to my senses, I decided to leave the fort for now. I discovered small camps such as Plainview and large settlements such as Ridgewood Farm, but once again there wasn't much more to do than loot at these locations. It was a little further north that something bizarre happened. A house exploded as I approached. Upon closer inspection, it appeared to be a distillery of some sorts. Still wanting to visit a civilization of some sort, I soon found myself in the town of Tumbleweed. The locals were friendly, the stores had new clothing, and Arthur was able to grab himself some food and drink before settling in for the night. Waking the next day, I travelled to the likes of Gaptooth Breach and Solomon's Folly, both of which were inhabited by local gangs. After fighting some tough battles, it was time to head back home, thus ending Arthur's action-packed and eventful vacation to the state of New Austin. This video was just a little bit of fun for you guys today, and in all honesty had no other purpose than sheer entertainment. But regardless, if you enjoyed what you saw, you all know what to do, and if you're new here and aren't subscribed already to the channel, please consider doing so. Should you wish to get in touch, you can find any and all social medias you may need in the video description below. Thank you all for watching. You've been listening to Phil of Philby Gaming, and I'll see you in the next one.